Insight, and specifically how to use AP Insight to respond to the Chief Reader Report. So appreciate you guys being here. As I said earlier, I'm very proud of us for being here on a Wednesday night right before Thanksgiving break. So for us here in Hillsborough County, this is, we get all of next week off. So Friday is our last day, actually.
You.
Go ahead and rub it in.
Yes, I will. Yes, I will. So, all right. So thank you for including that. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Megan Falero. I'm at Durant High School. I'm down here in Tampa, Florida. And I have been using AP Insight for 7 years now. I had the pleasure of being part of one of the 3 districts that got to pilot this program back before it was even AP Insight. It was AP Innovation back then. And I have seen this program grow, and I've been really excited to see what this has turned out to be. So I have pretty much been almost ground up with this. So I've been involved with this program for a very long time. And then I kind of got roped into, okay, just telling my own stories of how I use this program. So this was originally designed to not have mics, but I can give you that option. So it's an intimate group tonight. So I'm just going to leave your mics on. So feel free to just jump in whenever you have something that you want to talk about. Or if you are just want to mute yourself and you want to type into the chat box, not a problem with that as well. We are also working with Audra Ward at the College Board, and she is the Director of AP Instructional Design, so she works very closely, and tonight this was actually one of her brainchild, basically, that came out of this, so I'm always excited to see what Audra comes up with. So I was kind of excited about this because I'm responding to the Chief Reader Report, a very underutilized tool that a lot of AP biology teachers have. So what a neat idea on how to incorporate AP Insight into also using the Chief Reader Report. So kind of a cool idea. All right, so our goal then is to look at the tools and the resources that AP Insight provide and how we can use information that Nancy Morvello gives us back from the Chief Reader Report and how we can use AP Insight then to respond to, okay, after looking at what the kids did last year, okay, how can we make adjustments in what we do this year? So hopefully after today, after our time together, you'll be able to know where the Chief Reader Report is in case you don't use it. And to look at that to find out, okay, where are the kids making mistakes? And then what AP Insight has that will address that. So that's our plan. And then just to engage with somebody in DC and Chicago that I don't get to talk to very often. All right, there's our agenda. All right, so question for you. All right. Where am I? Do you use the Chief Reader Report to plan instruction? You've seen the Chief Reader Report, but you haven't used it. You've heard of it, you have no idea where it is. Or what the heck is that? Okay. Okay.
I always look at the Chief Reader Report every year.
Really?
Yeah, I'm trying to picture it in my head. This is just my 2nd year doing AP biology. I've taught AP chemistry for a few years, and I've seen. We'll obviously get to that. Is the Chief Reader Report where it kind of explains some of the mistakes students have made on various free response questions?
Yes, yeah. It's where she goes through each question. It's like, okay, this is what the kids did well. This is where the kids struggled. This is my advice I have for you.
Gotcha.
All right, so where do you find the Chief Reader Report? I will tell you that I've now been teaching, oh gosh, how many years have I been teaching AP Bio? 7, 8, 9, 9 years. And so I've been a reader now for 3. And so before I went to the reading, I had no idea what the Chief Reader Report was. It used to be called um, the Student Performance Q&A. So you might remember it as that.
Okay.
All right, so going back, if you go into AP Central, which has a new look as of this past summer, I was running a couple of APSIs, and everybody's like, "Oh, have you seen AP Central?" And I'm like, "They knew before I had." So it has a brand new look. So if you go into AP Central at the very top, there is an arrow here showing you that you click on AP Courses and Exams, and then once you scroll down to where the free response questions are, there is the Chief Reader Report that is embedded in that. So there's one of the links. There's also a link down there in the web links here on Adobe Connect as well. So that'll link you right to it if you want to pop to the Chief Reader Report later, just to take a look at it. So again, yeah, it used to be the Student Performance Q&A, and I think that that's why they changed it, is a lot of people didn't know that that was what the Chief Reader Report was. Just a fun fact, our chief reader for AP Biology is Nancy Morvillo, which is a half an hour from me. She's over at Florida Southern, and I've never met her.
Really? Oh.
Never met her. Yep, I've never had a big enough problem at the reading. I always feel like it needs to be a really big issue to go talk to Nancy. But I always feel like, okay, she's only a half an hour down the road. Like, maybe I should go, like, introduce myself. All right.
You should.
It's very tempting. So if you click on the student, if the Chief Reader Report, this is the first thing that pops up, which is kind of cool because it shows you the number of students that took the AP Biology exam last year, 254,270. Peter, this is only your second year, you said, teaching AP Biology?
Yes, ma'am.
You said you were teaching AP Chemistry before. Did you go to the reading for AP Chemistry?
No, I had just taught, it was one of those, I had just taught AP Chemistry for 5 years before they switched me over to AP Biology, so it didn't make sense for me to, spend any time with the chemistry teachers at that point, so I haven't yet.
Gotcha. All right, well, hopefully next year we will see you at the reading.
All right.
I'm definitely going to put a plug in for the reading because I put it off, and then finally a friend of mine, Teresa Holtzclaw, she's finally like, you have to try it. She's like, just try it for 1 year, because I'm like, it sounds horrible. But I'm trying to figure out, I have 3 of my children graduating this year, and I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to get to the reading in between 3 graduations. So it's for me, it is the best professional development I'm going to get throughout the year, other than if I get to get myself to NABT. So
I'm actually a reader as well, and I concur.
Kathy, how many years have you been going to the reading?
Since 2011, I think was my first year.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's for me. That's one of the reasons that the Chief Reader Report it often reflects a lot of the things we learn at the reading. So if you don't go to the reading, this is just an amazing report. But as a reader, this is kind of what we get. So 686 readers last year, and then you can see, all right, exam scores, and you can see, all right, where the students fell. So I always tell my students, all right, 6.4% of students were able to get a 5 across the nation. So it's really hard to get a 5 in AP Biology. So I think it's interesting looking at just the score distribution in itself.
I have a question. I'm really liking the way this is looking. I think it's really clear. I don't remember it looking like this before. Is this the way it looks online? Does this take like a screenshot from online?
Yes, this is exactly what it looks like. Yep. So if you go to the Chief Reader Report, this is the first page of the report. Yeah, this is a screenshot of it. So
really nice.
I love sharing this information with my students.
Yeah, they're really interested, I think, that when they look at the global mean, I think they're really interested to see that it's not as high as they would expect it to be.
For sure, absolutely. Yep. And then I can also tell them where I'm getting the information when I say, okay, this is a mistake that a lot of students often make. So if I don't go to the reading, this information in the chief reader report is super valuable. So within this report, you also have the ability to look at, okay, all right, for each of the FRQs last year, all right, what was the task that the students were asked to complete? What was the major topic of the question? The point value, and really the mean score of the question, because most of the time I try to give these questions to my students. And so if they only earn a 5 or 6, they're feeling super frustrated, but then I share the mean score with them and they were like, oh. So being able to just kind of give a little reality check of, okay, this is how you're doing compared to the mean of, the nation last year. All right, so here's a screenshot from question number 1 last year. Kathy, you said you were at the reading last year. What question did you do?
I actually graded this one.
What? Oh, how handy is that? I graded question number 2 last year. It was very rough.
Yes, can imagine.
All right, so we kind of we break it down into, okay, what the task is, what the topic is. You can see this is where Nancy responded to, okay, what were the responses as expected? So, all right, what did they want the kids to be able to do when they wrote this question? How well did the responses address the course content? So where is this in relation to the curriculum framework? How well do the responses integrate the skill? So also the science practices. Where do the science practices come into this question? And you can see, all right, my favorite part, what common student misconceptions or gaps in knowledge were seen. So for those of us that were reading, okay, where did the kids miss the points? What were the overall trends? And okay, this is what the kids are really, really struggling to do.
I really love the way this looks. This is so clear.
It is. It's absolutely clear. It's fantastic.
And as someone who's been kind of frustrated, my administration really pushes the instructional reports that come out shortly after the scores are released, and I always found those to be incomplete. So this really fills in a lot of the blanks.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, actually, because, I was thinking that as well. It's like, okay, I would want to know, the instructional planning report tells how my kids did compared to the mean, which is super, super interesting. But now you can see, okay, these are overall misunderstandings for the nation. So absolutely, but I immediately thought, okay, how does this relate to my own IPR? I love this. I'm like, okay, because this is often something that's missing when you look at the rubrics. Cool. So if you say, okay, the kids have to be able to graph, and I tell my kids, I'm like, you want to graph on the AP Bio exam because it's an automatic 3 points. But okay, so here we've got, all right, what were the graphing errors? And here is a nice picture of, all right, if the students were able to demonstrate understanding, this is what it should have looked like. All right, correctly identifying short and long-term effects. All right, so I'm going to actually point out right now identification of the null hypothesis, because I'm doing that right now in my class. And according to this, Nancy said many students failed to earn points for identifying the null hypothesis, instead identifying an alternate hypothesis. Consequently, students often did not earn a point for predicting the results that could be used to reject the null hypothesis. This is what my kids are doing right now.
Having graded this question.
Yeah.
Having graded this question, if you look at the graph without the error bars, because a lot of kids didn't put error bars on it and they didn't know what error bars were apparently, they would interpret the data completely differently. So the error bars were very important, and I know that I've really tried to give my kids more graphs with having to put error bars on them. So this is really nice. I like this.
Awesome. I was really surprised. When I look at some of these errors and then I look at, not every student, my group last year is completely different than the group that I have this year. So I'm looking at, a lot of the students had a hard time identifying the null. A lot of kids had a hard time drawing the error bars on. So um, this definitely helps direct, where I'm going this year for sure. Based on the experience of the AP reading of the student responses, what advice would you offer to teachers to help them improve the student performance on the exam? So this is where Nancy kind of chimes in and said, okay, after everything and after hearing back from the question leader, this is the advice that she has moving forward. An awesome section. So the first thing stood out to me, teachers should provide students with case studies and practice questions based on journal articles that focus on content they may not have previously studied in order to practice applying scientific thinking to a wide range of topics. That first paragraph, absolutely. Giving them something they've never seen before and saying, you might not have seen this specific topic, but you know the science content behind it. Let's apply the scientific principles we've learned, the science practices, in a scenario that, okay, it's not specific to an example I've given in class.
Where do you find case studies? Do you have a site you like, or?
Okay, I'm typing my new favorite site, Cogent Education. I found this at NABT 2 years ago. They have the most beautiful case studies I've ever seen in my entire life. So,
Nice.
I love Cogent. I swear I don't work for them. Peter, that's a great one. HHI, the data points, love them. Yes, absolutely. The case studies from the Buffalo case studies, obviously those are good, but I like this because it's relating back to graphing. So I think Peter actually has a great point with the data points, and I'm trying to do that more this year, giving them things they've never seen before and asking them to, all right, figure out. So just HHMI in general is just amazing. We're getting ready to do the Mendelian genetics, the sickle cell anemia. I'm hoping to get to it tomorrow, but probably Friday.
I was at
Oh,
NSTA Milwaukee last weekend, and I went to one of the HHMI sessions, and they were also talking about, it's called Science in the Classroom. I'll type it in. I think it's a place where Science Magazine posts approachable articles that kids could read in class, and then there are activities to go along with them.
Oh, thank you for showing that, because as much as I use HHMI, I don't know that. We did something really interesting last week at my high school. Never done it before. We sat down with our rosters and we looked at bottom quartile students in math and reading. I have a student in AP Biology that is in the bottom quartile of our high school for reading.
Oh dear.
So that makes me think that science in the classroom, that would be, now I'm looking for things knowing that she's in the bottom quartile. Okay, how can I give different levels of reading so that everything we read is not so high above her head? So you're saying this is very approachable?
Well, that's what they were saying. I haven't I haven't gone there. I think it's a place where they just have articles that have been published in Science Magazine, I'm assuming, that are approachable. And then, like I said, there are links and activities that go along with those articles.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. All right. So a little bit about the Chief Read Report. So now going back to AP Insight. So this specific question, so this is last year's question. This is FRQ number 3. So if you haven't looked at FRQ number 3, we've got a plant hormone here that promotes stem elongation. And we've got some Mendelian genetics in there. We've got a cross. Then we've got the universal genetic code chart. And so now we've got a little bit of molecular genetics linked in there. So looking at this question, this links to a specific challenge area in AP Insight. So this addresses challenge area 3.14. The student is able to predict how a change in genotype, when expressed as a phenotype, provides a variation that can be subject to natural selection. So there are 12 challenge areas in AP Insight, and these were specifically designed after a whole bunch of research, as in, okay, these are the 12 most challenging areas to teach and for students to learn. So for us to be able to get the message across and for students to pick it up. So the fact that this question is a challenge area already says, okay, there's some misunderstandings. Students are not grasping this all the way. So there is a direct correlation right here with this question and a challenge area 3.14. All right, so in this case, how did the student, in order to be successful in question number 3, I did not grade question number 3, but in going through the feedback at the end and looking through the chief reader report, this was very, very difficult for students. And you can see here, this was a 4-point question, and the mean was a 1.10. That's not good. So we've got some major misunderstandings here. So in order to be able to successfully demonstrate understanding in this question, the students had to relate changes in DNA to changes in proteins and then changes in phenotypes. And so if you look at the red box here, the students were supplied with a genetic code chart. And if they're like my students, hey, they can read that genetic code chart. The students were asked to describe the effect of the mutation on the enzyme. So here, do they understand that, okay, that mutation, that most of the time, according to the chief reader report, they were able to pick out, all right, that there was a point mutation from one letter to another. All right, that was what most students put. But then to provide reasoning to support the observed results that, okay, can you say how that then is going to change the enzyme and change that to, all right, if it changes the protein structure, all right, now we have an enzyme that's no longer going to be able to function. The students were then asked to predict the change in the codon sequence that results in the change in the amino acid sequence in the enzyme, and describe the effect on the individuals who were both heterozygous and individuals who were homozygous. And that was virtually impossible, it sounds like. So if we're looking at challenge area 3.14, all right, the students were asked to describe the effect of the mutation, describe 2 individuals with different genotypes who could have the same phenotype. So if we're looking at, okay, what were the students' struggles here? All right, so science practice 7 was a big one, all right? Taking something that's happening at the molecular level and then relating it to a change at the organism level. So connection across the scales. And then also this bottom one, and I'll tell you that I sat down after these were published and wrote them myself before I went over them with my kids. And I thought this was a really hard point to get, this last point with understanding the long-term effects on the genotype, on the phenotype. That, okay, all right, if you have a problem with the protein, how is that? I don't think students and my own thinking didn't take it to the next several steps. It's like, all right, if it's happening here, what's several steps beyond that? So part of this and knowing the chief reader report, understanding it, having read it, is, all right, planning for success, step number 1, all right? Understanding, all right, on the AP exam, what were the students, what do they have to do, all right, and how can they show their evidence for student understanding? And so in AP Insight, this is one of my favorite things, is the student success criteria. So under the Assess tab, before I give any building block quiz or challenge area assessments, I look at that student success and I say, okay, in order for my kids to be successful, all right, here's the success criteria. they need to be able to do this, this, and this. All right, so what is that evidence? How will I know if they really, really understand it? And then taking a look at, all right, how are you going to adjust for that? So going back to what Peter said earlier, you look at your own IPR report, say, okay, all right, based off of how my kids do, and then looking at the chief reader report, all right, how am I going to make adjustments to my syllabus this year, to my my planning based off of how my kids did last year. Also look at a summary sheet, what strategy. So it could be a strategy thing. My favorite part of the IPR report is I look at the science practices. I want to know that compared to the global mean, how did my kids do in terms of science practices and the ability to apply knowledge. So I really look at, okay, what strategies do I use to teach and assess? And do I give the kids the options in order to apply their knowledge enough in class?
Hey, Megan.
And then, yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
Do you know if, speaking of the IPR, I'm finding this webinar really, really helpful about the Chief Reader Report. Do you know if they're going to do one in the future about the IPR and Insight?
I think they have in the.
I've gotten emails about some of the IPR ones, and I haven't gotten myself together to get into them.
I agree. I haven't attended one, but I'm pretty sure that they have done those in the past. If you go on, if they go on that's a good question. Under planning, under strategic planning in AP Insight, the old webinars, they do record them, and there are webinars that you can go back and listen to. So there might be one specific to, I know they've done one in the past on the IPR report and specifically using AP Insight to respond to it. So
awesome.
I would say
thank you.
Your reporting. Yep. And then, also with the planning is, okay, what can I fix quick? Some of these things like that the graphing thing really caught my attention. And one of the things that Nancy said, I'm looking for it, was that something about the students often didn't label, yes, students did not earn points for graphing. It was commonly due to the omission of the units on the y-axis label. Okay, that is a quick fix.
Okay, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my goodness, but I have no doubt that that is an issue, even though I didn't grade anything that had a graph this year. And then, okay, looking at the Chief Reader Report, what are some issues that are going to take longer that, okay, it's a bigger issue, so you've got to bring it up throughout the year. So going back to AP Insight, another thing that I really, really like is the ability to anticipate student struggles. So going back to what Nancy Morvillo puts in our Chief Reader Report, being able to go into AP Insight, and I love that they have already identified the student struggles for us. And I don't care that I've been teaching AP Bio for 9 years. I still go in here and I look at the student struggles. And so here is a screenshot of specifically each building block at 3.24 and the student struggles that are expected throughout. And so that is really, really small, but if you can see there, building block C, the students cannot explain that genetic change result in several mechanisms, including mutations in DNA due to errors in replication in mutagens. So exactly what Nancy said was a problem last year, AP Insight has already identified that as a student struggle. So that is exactly the same, Nancy, basically. The AP Insight predicted that. And then a little bit there, building block C is the one that I think was the bigger problem, but that's just a personal reflection on it. Building block A, genetic variation at the molecular level. And that's okay. The student could identify a point mutation, but do they understand the effect of what does the point mutation do to that protein, do to that enzyme? So,
and so you use this student struggles like before you even sit down and plan. Is that correct?
Yes and no. Sometimes I will use this before I plan if I'm good. Sometimes as I'm teaching, I go in and say, okay, am I addressing these?
Oh.
I often, in the middle of, and this is a benefit of going to the reading, I will stop myself in the middle of a discussion or a lecture and go, oh, wait, guys, I saw students. All right, this is often something that they weren't clear on or they made a mistake on. This is something that students often struggle with. And I will share these with the kids going, stop, here's a big misunderstanding. Let's make sure we're really clear on it.
I know that I've used AP Insight for a few years now, and this is something I have to be better with. So I really enjoy, this is really cool. I enjoy this.
So when you say you need to be better at it, do you mean you
like,
knowing what the students' struggles are, or your students knowing what their students' struggles are?
Probably both. I like that idea that you just gave. But I guess I figure as an AP Bio teacher that over the years I know what their struggles are, but I think it doesn't hurt to be reminded and to make sure that there are some that I'm not remembering.
I agree. And year to year, I like to occasionally be reminded because the strength of my students this year are different from the strengths of my students last year. So just reminding where students may struggle is super helpful for me. So whereas my students were so good at Mendelian genetics and being able to predict inheritance patterns last year, this year is just a nightmare. It is their biggest struggle of the year so far. So going back in, and that is not specific to this challenge area 3.24, but there is a challenge area for that I am spending a whole bunch of time on right now. Step 3 in figuring out how to respond to a chief reader report is students monitoring their own learning. I could spend an hour talking about metacognitive reflection and how to teach students to be metacognitive. That is a really big thing for me. So these student progress sheets, I love them. They're amazing. I think that you could use them at the beginning of a lesson. So basically we've got, all right, here's the challenge area. Here are the major statements that the students should understand this, all right? And the students can go in, agree, disagree, not a big deal, but then they have to provide the reasoning for it, which is extremely difficult. Can you put into reasoning? Can you put into words why you agree or disagree with that statement? So now the students are taking some ownership. They're looking at, okay, do I understand that? Do I not understand that? Where are the kids monitoring their own learning?
I really like these.
Yeah,
I think those are really helpful.
I am putting, go ahead. In the chat box, I put a name of an article that changed my life. Going back to Audra, who works at the College Board, she sent me an article last year that she found. It was called Promoting Student Metacognition, and it was by Kimberly Tanner is the author. And it was a specific example of promoting metacognition in a biology classroom. And it was written from a college professor's point of view in dealing with different types of kids and how they learn. If you Google that, you can find the article. It is amazing. Step number 4 then, in responding to the Chief Reader Report, using building blocks to scaffold levels of content. So that's one of the great things about AP Insight, is that each challenge area is broken down into smaller chunks of content. So they call it building blocks. And so that you can make sure that you are addressing specific small chunks of content before you look at the big picture and look at the challenge area, and make sure that they can then synthesize all of those little pieces. So here on this screen is this is a screenshot of a performance task. So I don't use all of them, but there's a couple that I love, where you might have your own activities, maybe you don't, maybe these are very, very easy to incorporate, but they're asking kids to do something. And then it's asking them throughout to stop, check your understanding. All right, do you know what's going on? So this is one specifically for Challenge Area 3.14, looking at genetic variation at the molecular level. There's another one called the Puzzle of Life. I like that one because, but I'm not there yet, but it's one that I'm going to use when I get there, where the kids have to look at a DNA sequence, look at the mRNA sequence, look how it changes it, and then it asks them to make multiple different mutations and see how it affects the overall structure. So this looks very similar. I don't use this one. However, I do notice that it has to do with sickle cell anemia, so I might pull this one just because I'm doing HHMI. This might be a good follow-up to the Mendelian genetic sickle cell that I'm going to be doing. So
I was going to ask.
God.
You don't use all of the building block activities?
That's a great question. No, in fact, I don't use all the building blocks. There is, in each challenge area, so 12 challenge areas, and each challenge area has 3 or 4 building blocks. No, not enough time in my lifetime to do all of them. So, and it depends from year to year. I don't use the same ones. I look at when I need to see how my kids are doing. So, whereas I had set up to do a building block quiz a couple weeks ago, and I saw my kids' mastery level, and we didn't do it because I'm like, they have already demonstrated that they understand this concept. So I didn't do it. I skipped it. I moved on. However, I went and we did all of the building block quizzes for mitosis and meiosis, because my kids are really struggling with those. So we did all of those building block quizzes. So I think it depends on the needs of your students that year and how you need to check your progress, because if you are giving those quizzes, you are using them as formative feedback. So the idea is that you need to check and see how they're doing so that you can have your instruction respond to that need. So, nope, I do not use all of them.
Okay. But, I mean, do you pretty much use the building block quizzes and not the activities, or you just adjust every year? Is that what you're saying?
I have my favorite activities. So in terms of performance tasks, I have about 4 of them that are pretty standard. I do every year. I almost always, I always use the success criteria, even if I don't give the building block quiz. In fact, the success criteria is often one of the ways that I go, all right, no, I think I know my kids have already mastered this. I don't even need to give the building block quiz. But that also, there's a lot of flexibility here. If you have no problem assigning those as homework, you might do all of them. For me, I personally like to be there. I like to watch my kids struggle through the questions. I like to hear the conversations. I like to hear the questions they ask me. So in terms of how much class time that I needed to devote, that's part of it. There's a lot of people that give all the building block quizzes because they give them for homework. My only caveat there is if you're going to give a building block quiz, there has to be time for next steps. What are you going to do after that? So here is a question right here of a building block quiz and what they look like. So here we've got a A multiple choice question that would very much reflect something that you would see on the AP exam. So you've got a STEM here, and the nice thing about AP Insight is that you have a right answer and you have four very specifically written wrong answers. So, for example, if the right answer were A and the student chose answer B, this program is set up where, okay, if the student picked B, it's probably because they have this misunderstanding. So that's really, really nice. They're very deliberately written. And so as a teacher, I'm not good enough to write questions with distractors that tell me exactly where my misunderstandings of my students are. So I love these. And so if you do them to where you get virtual feedback, here is the next step. Review your student performance, and as I said, what is the next steps? How do you modify your instruction? These are not summative assessments. That's what the AP exam is. So what are you going to do based off of how your kids did on this? So there's a next steps guide. And then so after they take the quiz, my students are very much designed to know that, all right, as soon as they hit that submit button, they start analyzing what they did wrong. And so I don't grade the quiz itself. The grades would be atrocious. But I grade the feedback of, okay, all right, you got 2 out of the 4 wrong. All right, what are you going to do about it? So that they can dive in there. They can look at what they got wrong, what their misunderstandings are. I want a reflection. I want, okay, what are you going to do to make sure that you never miss this again? Making sure that I'm using this as a formative piece and not a summative piece.
Do you ever go back and look at this and try to figure out, for example, what does it say there? Mutation deficiency, or was that nitrogen deficiency?
Yeah, nitrogen deficiency.
So, for example, you know, if too many kids got that one question wrong, reteach it.
So that's a good question because I have 2 ways that I deal with this. Usually as the students, because I have them do this in class, I usually have my computer going and I watch the data pop in real time. So I see how individual students are doing. And then as soon as they finish, they start doing individual next steps. But then I take the time to really look and see, okay, overall as a class, how did we do? So when they walk in the next day, usually this screen that you're seeing here is projected on the screen, and there's a way that you can't tell it on this screen. There's a way to hide the names. Or I'll just slide that whole thing off the screen so that you can only see the questions and how the kids did overall. So I showed the class, all right, this is how we did overall as a class. And so they start looking for trends as well. So I'm like, all right, well, I see, yeah, nitrogen deficiency. We really struggled with that. So those of you got it right. Why did you get it right? What did you pick out of that question? So it could be an overall group teaching like that, or if it's that bad, I in the past, I've also printed out one set of questions for each table, and I tell each kid, all right, take a question. All right, take a couple minutes. All right, teach the other students. What did you need to know? What was the important part of this question that they may have missed that might have gotten that wrong? And that's also part of the next steps is I have the kids look at not only the content, but it also is the skill. Sometimes the kids will come back and say, Dr. Falero, I understood what the question was asking, but I couldn't read that chart. I couldn't pull out what I needed to know from that chart. There were too many numbers. So then I'm like, okay, well then that's not an issue with content. All right, that's a skill. All right, that's being able to analyze data. So that's something we look at as well.
That's a great idea. I like that. At the beginning of the year, one of the things that I've done is print out a set of questions, like when we're introducing Insight to them, and have them answer the questions together. And I do like walking around and listening to their conversation. and then they start taking them on their own. But yeah, I like your idea. That's great.
I really like that at the beginning of the year you have them take them together. These questions are so intimidating when you first see them that the kids are often terrified when I say, okay, these are reflective of what you might see on the AP biology exam. And then they do really, really bad at them until they get used to this style of question. So I like that, kind of taking it as a group, taking a little bit of that intimidation factor off in the beginning.
So they can, if Peter, you haven't
No,
used
ma'am.
AP Insight yet at all?
But watching this, I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited to get in there.
Okay.
Because yeah, we use like a data tracker.
You can, so the reason I ask is because you can print them. You can take those quizzes and you can print them out. And so early in the year, I printed a set of them, what we were studying, one of the challenge areas we were in, and let them answer them as a group together. And it's interesting to hear, well, I thought it was this and I thought it was that, and just to hear their conversations. So
these questions are also set up to where it could literally be 1 or 2 words different that separates A from B. So being able to take a highlighter and highlight what is the difference between answer A and answer B, and having them really look at the detail. I also like, Kathy, you had said that, okay, if you take it as a group, because my brain is spinning right now, if you take it, then you could then take those questions and put them on your, say, unit test, and especially if the kids got them wrong, like this nitrogen deficiency question, what if you put that on your unit test and say, okay, if the kids truly got it, then they'll get it right on the unit test, but then use it as more of a summative assessment at an individual level.
yeah, that's a great idea too.
So.
What about, I'm sorry, Peter, go ahead.
I'm good.
Okay. Can you explain just really quick up on the upper right, the color key?
Oh, yeah. So green is mastery. So if it's a 5-point building block quiz, it's usually you got 5 of them right, sometimes 4 of them right. The yellow is approaching mastery, and red is, we got to go back.
Say what mastery is, or can the teacher edit that for a given quiz?
They tell you that you cannot edit that.
Okay,
they
cool.
call mastery a 80% or above. And so what's interesting is that the kids, I don't use the word AP Insight. I don't use that language with the kids because this is a website for the teachers. And so when they go in, it's M-class for them. So as they take more and more building block quizzes, they will also start to notice, you'll notice that the kids are color-coded. For every building block quiz in every challenge area, they are color-coded. So as the year progresses, they start looking at trends going, wow, I was really bad at energetics, but hey, look, I'm doing pretty good with genetics. So they kind of start noticing their trends. So all of their color coding, they see that, and they can go back and looking at their building block quizzes. They can see those all year long. That's on their website when they log in to take their assessments online. This is this next steps guide that I was talking about. I give this in the beginning. This is the reflection piece for them. So it's 3 pages long. It is generic to a building block. So it's nothing specific to a specific building block. So this is where the students take the time. Okay, all right, what was my strength? What was my difficulty? They reflect on each question, and then, all right, what am I going to do next? So this is something that I streamline, and I made it into basically a little graphic organizer where the students reflect on each question. All right, what did I get? What didn't I get? They're not allowed to take the wording off of the. Basically, after they take a building block quiz, there's a little caret, and they can open each question, and it tells them, all right, if you got this question wrong and you picked this, well, it may be because you didn't understand that. They are not allowed to take that wording. They have to sit and really think about it, and reflect on their own personal, why did I get this question wrong? And so that is part of what I contribute then to their grade. It's like, okay, if I see proper reflection on your part, then I'll give them, let's say, half the points back if I see that they reflected properly and that I know they won't miss that question again. And so that's what the whole that's a screenshot of the first page of having them analyze and reflect. And that's something then that I've taken to my unit tests, and I've kind of this is part of that, building that culture of, okay, we're learning but we're making mistakes, that's okay, let's figure out what we did wrong, we're not going to make those again, right? So I think this is a whole class culture piece of reflecting on their learning and building on it.
I have to be better. Honestly, I have to say I've never used this, but listening to you and how you use it, I think I should probably do that.
If you go into share what works, it's very, very simple. It kind of looks like this chart down here at the bottom. It's, okay, what is the question? Did I get it right or not? All right, what's your reflection? What did I understand? What didn't I understand? So this kind of gives them the direction. It teaches them how to think through the questions. And then, like I said, you can streamline this, because every time I give a building block quiz, I don't want to
Question,
three
Megan,
sheets
how do you
of paper.
evaluate? You said if they do a decent reflection, you give them half credit. How do you evaluate their reflections?
Based off of this chart you see at the bottom, their reflection, I told them, I said it can't be word for word copied off of that page. Like, I want to see, oh, okay, I get it now. I didn't understand that I needed this part of the data table. That's something that it wouldn't say in the reflection piece of what the program writes. I can see where they finally had a little light bulb moment. So, yeah, cool. It's in their writing to me, basically. Yeah. And here's an example of a challenge area assessment. So building blocks are those little small pieces of information. The challenge area assessment then is, all right, have the students gained that understanding at an enduring understanding level? So challenge area assessments, where building block quizzes are multiple choice, challenge area assessments are FRQ style. So the students then have to take all those little chunks of information and combine that and be able to write a short response. I love that they took my advice, because they kept asking me. They were like, okay, you're one of our biggest users of this program, and yet you never use the challenge area assessments. I'm like, yes, I do. I just never put the data into the program. So now there's a little box where the kids can literally type into the program. They can type their responses in, and then I can go ahead and pop their grade into the computer. So you get a challenge area assessment report, just like you do a building block report and you get a class report. But if you don't do it in the program, you don't get the report. So they're always wondering why I didn't do that. So,
you know what I have found, that let's see, how am I going to put this? If I give an FRQ from a previously released exam, the kids know now where to go to find the answers. Yep. And so I guess that they can anticipate, maybe because of where we are in the program, yep, what essays might be given. Yep. And so I find that the challenge area assessments are nowhere except here. And so I can give a unique question that they won't be able to find the answer to online.
You are 100% right, because I literally said those words today. I said, you know, an FRQ on fruit flies is coming. You can Google them. You know that, right? But, and that's fine, because they're practicing. I'm telling them, you better go in, look at old FRQs and practice. You're right. But when it comes down to truly seeing if they understand, you do need to have something available that they have never seen before. So I completely agree with that statement. All right, so kind of just, okay, we've looked at the Chief Reader Report, where to find it, and then, how it aligns with AP Insight. So, how can using the Chief Reader Report inform the use of AP Insight in your classroom? Do you see the correlation? Is this something that you would find valuable?
For me,
Very much so. And I mean, again,
yes,
just thinking off the
definitely.
cuff about the quality of reflections I was able to get, I wonder if I almost gave them the the chief reader report kind of explanations to as a reading, where the students kind of have to gauge their reflections off of, or put their reflection in the context of some other misconceptions that the chief reader report addresses.
Awesome.
I thought it was so cool that question number 3, I think is what we're talking about, question number 3,
Yeah.
actually went so well with one of the challenge areas that, I would be interested in seeing if that holds true as the year goes on. But wow, how prescient were they? um, that's really helpful. I really like the new look of the Chief Reader Report compared to before. Do they still have all the sample essays in there? Have you looked at that?
They're on there under the same area where the Chief Reader Report is. They're not specifically part of the Chief Reader Report though, but the what do they call them? Like the student samples.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
in there too. They're in there in the same area as the Chief Reader Report. They're just not part of the Chief Reader Report.
Okay. Do you ever use those? Um, to ask your kids how they would grade them?
Not as often as I think that is super, super valuable, having the kids look at someone else's writing and being able to then look at the rubric and look at the language that College Board uses. Okay. And also looking at, okay, if we wrote that question, and I do it maybe twice a year, where if the kids really, really struggled, and they're very narrow in their responses, I give them the rubric and I say, look at all the different directions that your mind could have gone and all these other options that are on that rubric. And then I do give them one of the student samples and ask them to grade it based off of the rubric. So just because I like broadening their horizons, that they automatically go to this response, and maybe that's because I emphasize it, and so that I kind of start having them think outside the box when they look at FRQ. So not as much as I should, though.
Well, time.
Yes, indeed, time. The last part of AP Insight, not specific to the Chief Reader Report, but the Share What Works. And I did mention earlier that I took a next steps guide and I just streamlined into a little basically graphic organizer, and I put it on the Share What Works. This is the discussion board for AP Insight. So um, if you have a question, pop it on there. There's a place where you can ask the moderator questions. These are specific to just AP Insight teachers, so this is a chance for um, you to ask questions about the program or share your successes. So I encourage you to use the Share What Works. And if you have any questions, here is anything about the program, whether you find something that you're not sure about, you're looking for something, apinsight at collegeboard.org. They get back to you super, super quick, because I also use that when I am confused about something or have a question. So they are very, very good at that support. And so they will also be coming up with the next PLC in January. So if you have anything that is specific that you want to hear about, they are always open for suggestions on how they can help you make this program the best it can. So, alrighty. All right, well, that's basically everything that I wanted to talk about tonight. So, at this point, do you have any
No, that was super
questions for
helpful. Thank
me
you.
that we haven't talked about yet? Oh, I'm glad. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for being on tonight.
Thank you, Megan.
No problem, Kathy. Good talking to you. Thanks for all the
Likewise. Thank you both
questions.
very much. Have a great night
Good luck,
and a
Peter.
great holiday. Thank you.
All right, happy Thanksgiving, guys. Yeah, happy holidays. All right, can I
So, um,
Yay. That was a good discussion.